Hello everybody, welcome to Super Games. Now, as you may have saw by the title, we are going to be talking about the history of PlayStation. Now, let's take a good look at where we are. So, this is the 1990s, and Ken Kutaragi, the owner of Sony, ended up wanting to become partners with Nintendo. Now, the thing is that they were originally going to make the Nintendo PlayStation. However, since Nintendo wanted full licensing rights, Sony backed out. So this device never came to be. And so at that point in time, Sony still wanted to try into the gaming business and decided to make their own version of the PlayStation. And they came up with all kinds of controllers for the PlayStation. My favorite one is this one because it's honestly pretty nice looking to me, even though it's weird. However, after all the models they made, they finally stuck with the original PlayStation controller. And once the PlayStation was released in 1994, it became a huge hit. However, instead of focusing on 2D games like all other companies were, like Nintendo and Atari and all those type of companies, instead of focusing on 2D games, they focused more on 3D games, which was something nobody was really into at that time, because they didn't really see it as worthwhile type of thing. So they were pretty different back in those days. However, they eventually changed up the original PlayStation's controller. How it at first didn't have any Joy-Cons, which was something that almost every company mostly didn't have Joy-Cons because they didn't really see it as something they should focus on. Plus, people at the time thought they were strange and weird. Thought they were a weird thing to add up to controllers. However, around 1995, they released the new controller, which had the joysticks. And people were wondering why they were added onto there. People thought they were kind of strange. People thought that it was useless. And they added 2 little triggers in the back as well onto the controller. So it kind of made the kind of iconic PlayStation controller, but it also kind of wasn't iconic because they technically didn't have it all there yet. But note that PlayStation was also different for one reason. They didn't use cartridges. They used CDs instead of cartridges. So they were a lot more different when it came to games. They focused on 3D games instead. They used discs for games instead of cartridges. So they were pretty different at that time. Very, very different. Now I myself kind of admire them for being that different, because that shows that they want to be different. However, around 2000 is when they released the PlayStation 2. Now this PlayStation was very different. The design was different. The controller was the same though. And the games were a bit better. They had better graphics when the PlayStation 2 came out. However, one PlayStation that stuck out the most was the PlayStation 2 Slim. It was very small and slim. It was much slimmer than any other PlayStation. It is one of the slimmest PlayStations I've ever seen before. In fact, if you compare my PlayStation 3 Slim compared to the PlayStation 2 Slim, this PlayStation 3 Slim would look huge comparison to the PlayStation 2 Slim. So it was, honestly to me, the slimmest PlayStation I've ever seen, to be honest. However, before 2006 rolled around, came the PlayStation 3. But the thing you must know about the PlayStation 3 is before it was released, before 2006, it was silver and it had a different controller, nicknamed the Boomerang. However, Sony thought that the slightest change of the controller would make audiences not like it, so they decided to keep the original controller. And then 2006 came the PlayStation 3, which I actually do own a PlayStation 3 in my own office. It's a PlayStation 3 Super Slim, but, you know, it still counts as one. Then, when 2013 rolled around, came the PlayStation 4, which is one of the best-selling PlayStations ever. And what also came with the PlayStation 4 was the PlayStation 4 Pro, which was very different looking, and the PlayStation 4 Slim, which was a small bit slimmer, but not very slim at all. And what also came with it is a different controller. The controller that came with this one was a lot more different than the controllers before. This one had a light bar on the front, and people would say that the controller was more comfortable. In fact, another thing they added on to the controllers was a share button, which was basically you could share photos or videos of what you were playing and all your achievements and all that stuff. It also added a touchpad here, which was never really used. There were some games that used the touchpad, but most games never really used it at all, which kind of made it a useless part of the PlayStation controller. Also, another thing that was a really cool feature with the light bar right here onto the controller is if you were playing Grand Theft Auto and you were getting chased by the police, this would flash blue and red, like the police lights. So that was honestly a pretty cool feature. And I myself believe that this is probably the most comfortable controller I've ever used. But I'm going to go further than that and say it is the most comfortable controller, period, that I've ever used. And that typically says a lot, because I played on a lot of controllers from a lot of systems, from Xbox to Nintendo to Atari, and this is the only controller that I would say is the most comfortable that I've ever used so far. So, yeah. And then finally in 2020 came the PlayStation 5, which right now is, to me, the best looking console I've ever seen. And another thing that came with it is the controller. Again, it changed drastically this time. This time, it had different rumble features in different parts of the controller. So you feel it in multiple different parts of the controller, not just one area. Plus, another thing that came with it, which is revolutionary, is it came with a built-in mic. So there's no need for anyone nowadays who owns a PlayStation 5 to say, anyone have a mic? I think those days are starting to go away. But yeah, right now the PlayStation has sold millions of consoles throughout its time. At this point, I would say it's sold over 1 billion of its consoles. That's what I would say. And I know that PlayStation is not going anywhere. And it will never leave anytime soon. And that basically about wraps it up for this video. Now, another thing to note about PlayStation is they're technically right now a really big business, and they are technically they're a big competitive towards Xbox and Nintendo. And they're one of those businesses that would never stop, is what I would say. Those type of businesses that would keep going no matter what, is what I would say. That's how I would consider them. And so that's it for today's video. If you guys would like to see any other episodes on console histories, please let me know in the comments. And I will see you all later. Keep gaming, folks.